Hello everybody. If you've ever looked at a Golf R and thought, that's probably the car for me, but it is just a little bit too sensible, well, there is an alternative, because today I am driving the VW Scirocco R. The third generation Scirocco is one of those cars that we all remember, but we've also nearly all forgotten. It's the sort of car that when you're having a chat with your friends about what to get next, someone pipes up and goes, "Oh, what about that?" And you all go, "Oh, I forgot those existed. Oh yeah, actually, they're quite good." And on the face of it, there's a lot to like about this car. Fundamentally, it is a Mark V Golf. The interesting thing about that is that in the Mark V Golf, they didn't actually have an R, but what they did have was the evergreen Golf GTI and the rather raspy and gorgeous R32. That had the 3.2 litre VR6 combined with a four-wheel drive system. This is something of a compromise because it has the 2 litre turbocharged four-cylinder as you'd find in a GTI, front-wheel drive as you'd find in a GTI, but it's got the power of the R32. So this early version made 265 horses. Torque is 258 pound-feet, that's 350 newton meters. You had a choice of gearbox, either a 6-speed manual or a 6-speed DSG, which is what this car I'm driving today has. This particular example has been brought to me by a lovely chap called Ollie, who's only had it for a couple of months. He bought it to replace an E90 generation BMW 330d, which was, amongst other things, his work wagon. However, a change of job meant that he can now walk to work, so no longer benefited from the long-distance fuel economy of a diesel. That meant he wanted something just a little bit more exciting, but that still had an air of practicality. He needed some boot space, plus room for the little one in the back. In his past, he has had a number of iconic performance hatchbacks, including the MG ZR 160, and if there's somebody out there watching who's got one of those, please can I drive it? Also, an MG ZS 180, the saloon version, a Renault Clio 172, 182, Megane 225, Seat Cupras, so on and so forth. So, in the lineup of cars he's had, this blends in rather well. And I've got to say, when it comes to the Scirocco, despite the fact they've now been out of production for 4 years and were introduced 14 years ago, they're still a great looking car. This is beautifully proportioned, wonderfully low, and does seem somewhat race car-like versus the more purposeful Golf. As it happens, the third generation Scirocco also has roots as a race car too, though to call this anything like a homologation special would, I think, be a stretch too far. It is essentially a very pretty Golf, and there's nothing really wrong with that. In fact, when you hop into this car and you remember that this interior dates back, in essence, to 2003, because that's when the 5th generation Golf was introduced, you realise just how many things VW absolutely nailed with that car and subsequently this. So up front we have, on the left, rev counter, on the right, speedo, in the middle, trip computer giving me all the information that we need. It's spot on. The wheel is perfectly sized, feels really nice in the hand, is flat bottom to give you just that little essence of race car. To the left we have a, basic, now outdated infotainment system, but with dual zone climate control, heated seats, all the functionality that you might like, and this car also has adaptive dampers. So you've got 3 settings: comfort, normal and sport. I am currently in comfort mode, and on this reasonably lumpy bumpy country road, it's actually doing a very fine job. These seats are also excellent, very supportive, very comfortable, and they feel perfectly sized to my frame. These base ones are cloth and Alcantara. They look okay. I suppose some people prefer them. I personally would have the leather, which you could get as an option. One issue I have always had with VW is that, like a lot of other German stuff, even if you buy one of the top model cars, they're not really that keen on giving you much standard, which is a shame. That being said, nothing here really seems to be that absent. And one option this car does have is the Dynaudio stereo system, which is legendary amongst car stereo geeks, so I'm going to turn that on quickly and see if that's any good. A very quick 30-second Radio 1 test says yes, it actually is. Very impressed with it. Decent clarity, plenty of bass, reasonably listenable. As upgrade stereos go, it's very good and the reputation well deserved. Rear seat space is reasonable. Of course, room for passengers, both in terms of leg and head, is a little bit compromised versus the Golf equivalent, but not that badly. Boot space is also reasonable for a car of this size, and I have to say, from here it does feel like something a little bit more special than your average Golf. You feel like you're in something lower slung, wider haunched. It feels just that little bit more aggressive. Though in truth, the steering, the throttle, the gearbox and everything feel very much standard VW. Once upon a time, a girlfriend of mine had one of these in the Viper Green. This is rising blue, and that was a 2-litre diesel, also with the DSG box. It was remapped from 140 to 170 brake and was a fabulous car. Not the most involving of drives, but pretty pokey and ludicrously economical. That was back in the days where we didn't really question how diesels got so many miles per gallon. That one on a run did over 70. This one, as you may imagine, is not quite so parsimonious, but even with very gentle effort, you can still get easily 30 to the gallon plus on a run. Having fun, you're going to get closer to 20. Realistically, the average for this car has been 24 to 26, but that's because it's still in its honeymoon period. This being the R though, I suppose what you really want to know is whether it's actually any good when you do decide to have fun. So let's find out. This example was sold to Ollie as being entirely unmodified, though having inspected it closer, we're not convinced that that is the case. A couple of things give it away. First off, in the engine bay, the sort of duct that gets the air from the front to the engine has been mucked around with and is currently held together with a couple of screws. Secondly, this seems a little fruitier than I ever remember any stock VW product sounding. Not that I'm complaining though, because I think this exhaust, if it is modified, has been very, very well judged. Response is decent. There is only a moment of turbo lag, but the engine pulls strongly and cleanly all the way to sort of 5,000 plus. The red line is at 6.5 grand, but truth be told, it's in the mid-range where it feels like this does its best work. That being said, if you do take it to the red line, it certainly doesn't drop off. It's just that there's no real difference between 5 and 6,000. The gearbox is also very, very good. Not snappy like a modern PDK, but quick enough and certainly a step up on the old 6-speed autos that we would have been used to at the time. The paddles on the wheel are very compact, but in a car like this, I don't mind that. You can also shift gear with the lever down here if you so desire, though it is the wrong way around. I have now played with all of the suspension modes, and truth be told, perhaps unsurprisingly, it's normal, which provides the best balance of the lot. Sport just adds a little bit of jitter and harshness, but not really any benefit. The weakness of this car, common to many VWs of the time, is steering feel. It's just not great. There's a nice enough weighting to it, but doesn't really seem to change all that much regardless of what you're doing, and you don't feel like you've got the most control over the front end of the car. This car is currently running on budget rubber, but grip doesn't seem to be all that much of an issue. Overall then, this makes a very compelling package. What would its rivals be? I suppose the slightly later Vauxhall Astra GTC, very sexy looking car, but slightly lower quality interior, though a touch more modern. Something like the Alfa Romeo Brera, which looks a lot nicer, can be had with a V6, but is very compromised. Nowhere near as reliable and nowhere near as much space inside. You can really get 4 adults in here. In the Brera, good luck to you. The only real thing to compare it with would be a Golf, because for the at least £10,000 you'll have to part with to get one of these now, what you could have is a Golf R32. Though not maybe quite as sexy looking as one of these, the 3-door R32 I think is a rather gorgeous thing. It also has a soundtrack that certainly can beat this, and though it isn't going to be any quicker, in fact I'm sure this is the faster car, it does have a little bit more character in terms of powertrain, and it's a touch more practical. I think if I were going to buy a car now in that category, it would be the R32. But the Scirocco is a very fine thing, and the benefit of this engine is that if 260 odd horsepower isn't enough, you can get a lot more out of it. Honestly, I was somewhat surprised when I saw how much money these are still commanding. The very, very cheapest on Auto Trader was still about £10,500, £11,000, and many of them were modified, which I probably would want to avoid. However, R32s also did a similar thing. They got to a point and just stopped. So in terms of investment potential, though this is unlikely to ever be worth masses more than it is now, I reckon your money is going to be pretty safe. So the Scirocco R really is what it says on the tin. It's a nice, sensible Golf in a slightly spicy frock. And there's nothing wrong with that. A huge thanks to Ollie for bringing his car out today. Thanks to you as ever for watching. Don't forget to hit the like button, comment down below, subscribe if you haven't already, make sure you've checked the bell icon so you'll be notified of every new video release, and I'll see you for the next one. Bye bye.